Okay, boxing fanatics, welcome to the 19th episode of the podcast. And I'm joined today once again by Mr. Oscar Pick. Oscar, well, what can we say about last weekend? I mean, it was um it was a surprise in many ways, I think. Huni, I think, produced a fantastic performance, was winning pretty much every single round. I think he actually proved a lot of people wrong with his performance, but then we've seen it so many times in a heavyweight division in boxing. It's probably one of the only sports where you can be down on all the scorecards. You could be losing the fight, and you just can land one punch and basically change and basically win the fight based on one moment. Fabio Wardley basically coming back, and yes, rescuing his unbeaten record, rescuing his hometown glory, and knocking out Huni with probably one of the best right hands I've ever seen, to be honest. If you factor in like the timing, the power, the occasion. Yeah, what's your initial reaction to last Saturday?
Yeah. I have to admit, I was watching Callum Simpson against Ivan Zuko, so I didn't. It was quite annoying, really, because I look on social media and it's a classic. Oh, like Wardley, he's just done the impossible sort of thing, and I'm almost frustrated that I didn't get to experience that in real time because obviously everyone would have been going mental quite rightly. And
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't get to sort of see it in its full glory, but obviously, stunning victory. And you mentioned there, Huni proved a lot of those doubters wrong. He really showed up on Saturday night, and he proved us two wrong as well. Because
Oh
in the
my.
podcast, I didn't want to bring it up, but I have to. Like we both sort of came to the agreement, I guess, that in last week's podcast where we thought he'd be a bit negative. We we were borderline slagging him off. Let's be honest, and like sort of saying does he have the punch resistance? Like, we were basically quite comfortably going for a Fabio Wardley knockout, which did happen. So our predictions both came true, but obviously, what led up to that moment, I don't think either of us were expecting, and I think Huni just as much as Wardley really announced himself on
Mm.
Saturday. He's a really exciting addition to the heavyweight sort of fringe world level scene, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, I think most people were quite right to look at that performance he put in against who was it again, Kevin Lorena,
Very nice. Yeah, yeah.
and come to their own conclusions and be like, well, if he's looking like this against Kevin Lorena, then Fabio Wardley, he's going to handle him with relative ease. But I
Mhm.
think Wardley, no, Huni, sorry, just showed exactly how dynamic he is. His footwork was, it wasn't anything out of this world in terms of the angles that he was creating, but it was just so much quicker than Wardley's. I felt like the way he was sort of dipping in and out of range and the way he was entering the pocket was just so sort of I guess meticulous and slick.
Yeah.
And he's got some really quick hands as well. Like in terms of the attributes that he does possess, he could cause quite a few heavyweights a lot of problems. But as you quite rightly say there, Fabio Wardley's just got that equalizer, and he just pulled a rabbit out of the hat basically. That's exactly what happened. I mean, I'm sure he'd love to claim that that shot was, sort of expertly set up and that he was always planning on, landing that right hand. But I think it was literally just a case of him being right up against the wall, knowing that this fight was basically running away from him, and he just had to sort of pull that out of his locker just at the moment he needed it most.
Mhm.
So it was almost like, and we've said this about Fabio Wardley before, whenever he's hurt whenever his back's against the wall, that almost brings, another sort of layer
Yeah.
out of it. That brings something out of him, doesn't it? And how he responds to those moments is really quite impressive. So that was just another example of, the kind of, I guess, man that Fabio Wardley is, where even when he's sort of faced, and it is quite ironic, isn't it, that the whole tagline for this show was running towards adversity because he he literally ran towards the adversity and then he basically dealt with it, in emphatic fashion, and the fact that when he's faced with that adversity, the way he responds is, what we saw on Saturday night is, that's just that's the making of a really exciting, dramatic, and ultimately probably successful fighter.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, you're right to mention last week's pod. I thought, I don't think we knocked Huni, but yeah, we didn't have much belief. And I think if I'm being completely honest, yeah, I didn't think he'd look that good. I thought Wardley was, maybe if I'm being completely honest, I actually thought Wardley would probably knock him out in the first few rounds. I never envisaged that he would produce such a performance. And let's be honest, we were well on our way. We were well on our way to both have, like, egg on our face, because he was well on his way to get a points win. I thought the disparity in boxing skills was massive. I think, like, it actually showed me that fight. She showed me the difference between, like, it was clear who was the fighter with the amateur pedigree, who had boxed their whole life, and who was the white collar fighter. I thought Wardley actually looked so wild sometimes, like the way he was swinging the right hand, he was missing by a distance. Huni was the better fighter, by a better boxer, sorry, by a mile. His skills are brilliant. To be fair, I really really enjoyed watching, and I've always had respect for Huni. I'm even more of a bigger fan now, despite his loss, because I just love the way he was boxing, the accuracy, the footwork, the hand speed. And I remember you pointed out last week that he should push Wardley back, and that's what he did as well. It was amazing to see he was pushing Wardley back. Wardley was on the ropes. Wardley, like Carl Frampton on commentary was saying, was actually feeling sorry for himself a little bit. He was really getting beaten up in there. But I think, to my own credit, like I said in last week's podcast, is that Wardley has so much dog in him. He really has so much dog in him. And when you've got that kind of mentality and that kind of, never say quit, you've always got a chance. You can always turn it around, and that's what he did. I mean, what a knockout! You really couldn't write it. In his hometown, amazing knockout, and yeah, the best win of his career. Um, but I think we do have to discuss, Huni's downfall here, because he was well on his way to, producing a brilliant win. And I think some people have rightly said that, maybe complacency crept in there, because the knockout, he decided to trade with Wardley. It's very clear he decided to trade him in the middle of the ring. He really didn't. He probably didn't need to do that. But what's your opinion on that? Do you think Hooley got a bit complacent? Did you think maybe, because he was really winning the fights so easily sometimes? Do you think he got a bit complacent and just thought, yeah, I'm going to trade. I'm going to maybe try and get the knockout now against Wardley?
Yeah, well, I think what made the shot particularly devastating was that Wardley was actually throwing a shot at the time. So it was effectively a right hand counter, and those types of shots, when they connect, they're always going to be more impactful because Wardley's really sort of opened himself up, and then no, Huni, sorry, has really opened himself up, and Wardley's obviously caught him when he's square on. So I think yeah, you could definitely say that Huni got a little bit reckless at that specific moment, because up until that point, his defense was tight as anything, and
Mhm.
it wasn't really giving Wardley any openings at all.
Mhm.
It was only in that moment really that Wardley finally had his opportunity, and I think, yeah, you could definitely make that argument, but it's so easily done. Like
Mhm.
Huni's dominating every single round. He's in the sort of flow state. He's comfortably cruising. He's found his rhythm, so it's so easy to just switch off for that split second. And I think you go back and rewatch the knockout, and Huni's sort of coming in with a low guard. He's not really at that point. You're probably right. He probably thinks to himself, I've got this victory in the bag. Like all I've got is, 2.5 rounds left, and I've won. So it's easily done in terms of him allowing that to happen, and getting a bit complacent. But equally, that right hand from Wardley, even if you know, even if Huni was kind of a little bit more defensively astute at that time, just the sheer force of the right hand, like even if it didn't hit him clean, it would have still had, an absolute monstrous effect on him. Just because Fabio Wardley clearly just has that just impossibly
Mhm.
destructive power. And we always hear these comparisons between him and Deontay Wilder, and I'm really starting to see that now because you compare that fight to Wilder against Ortiz in that rematch where he's losing every single round, and then he just pulls a punch out of nowhere and it's lights out. I'm really starting to see that comparison now between him and Wilder, and I think yeah, he just sort of proved that on the night really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's true. I think there are some similarities there. Definitely, they both started boxing late. They both got big right hands. Um, and they both I guess they can both land it when they need to land it. I think what's interesting though as well as this fight is I think we also saw actually, despite the win, despite the amazing knockout, I think we actually saw in this fight how I guess vulnerable Wardley can be as well. Because I think this fight actually more than any of his other previous fights. I mean, we saw a little bit in the first Fraser Clark fight, but Huni really, I think, actually exposed Wardley's lack of boxing skills a little bit because it really wasn't a contest, boxing skill wise. It really wasn't Wardley did actually look, quite amateur in there compared to Huni. And I guess you could say the same thing about Wilder for us, as well. Wilder's never been the best boxer, but he's always he's always found that right hand. So it's interesting. So I mean, will Wardley be like the next Deontay Wilder? Will this be him going forward? Will it just be a case of okay, he might get out box as the level goes up, as he faces top 20 guys, top 10 guys. Maybe is this what's going to come then? He's going to be down on the scorecards and then he's just going to land a big right hand out somewhere. So do you think Wardley could have done anything differently to be a bit more, I guess? I mean, ultimately, obviously, the win is what that counts, and he got the knockout, he got the fairy tale ending. But could he have done anything, Wardley, to be a bit more competitive? Or does it even matter? Does he even need to be competitive? Or should he just go down that route, the Wilder route, where, okay, I'm going to give rounds away to my opponents. And, I know at some point I'm going to catch you, even if I'm losing every single round. So, yeah, what do you think about that? Do you think he needs to work on his boxing skills, or do you think he should just be like, okay, let's just make the most of being like a puncher, I guess.
Well, I think he sort of said in his post-fight interview that, he needed to go back to the gym and work on a few things. And I'm sure there's certain areas where they can obviously quite clearly tighten up on. But having said that, with his lack of amateur experience, there's only so much you can do from a technical standpoint. I
Mm.
think there's obviously a reason. I mean, we saw Lomachenko retire last week, and he had nearly 400 amateur fights.
Mm.
And that showed in each performance because he was an absolute technical genius every time he fought. Um, and the reason for that is because of his amateur experience. You have nearly 400 fights, and you're going to be pretty good. More than likely. So I think for Wardley now, this is almost his identity. Being the sort of danger man of the heavyweight division, and he said in previous interviews as well, like, it's worked for him up until this point and it's continuing to work for him. I think with him, what makes him so exciting is, even if he is up against a technically skilled boxer,
Mm.
as he said previously, he only has to be perfect for 1 second.
Mm.
He's so dangerous, and as you say, he's got that dog in him. He's got that natural grit, that natural toughness that you can't
Mm.
teach. So he's got a lot of the things that you can't teach.
Mm.
Then the things that you can teach, he's almost lost that time. Like at being sort of 30-year-old
Mm.
heavyweight. I'm sure there's ways that he can sort of tighten up his defense a little bit, maybe work on his footwork. But there's
Mm.
only so much he can do. Like I can't see him. We're never going to see a day where Fabio Wardley becomes sort of Usyk type character. Like it's just not going to happen. So I think he almost just needs to embrace this identity that he has, which is clearly just an absolute ferocious puncher. Although he might not like to accept that because he said to himself, he wasn't happy with his performance. Yeah, I think he can, that identity can take him really far.
No, that's such a good point, to be fair. That's such a good point. I mean, at the age of 20, it's true. I mean, if you start boxing, I think it was 20. Like, yeah, it's true. You're always going to be behind the guys. Like, te from a technical standpoint, you're always going to be behind the guys who start from an early age. That, that is a given. Um, but like you said, Wardley's going to be very exciting, and he's only 30 years old, and, he's going to be around for at least probably another 5 years, if nothing, more than likely. Um, so we look forward to that for sure. As for Huni, do you think maybe even, I remember we alluded to this last week. Is it possible that maybe on the flip side, a lack of punching power cost Huni in the end? Because if you actually watch this fight, I mean, he landed so many punches on Wardley, but never really put a dent, never really put like there was a few times where Wardley was a little bit hurt and stuff, but never really dropped him, and Wardley wasn't really like wobbled or anything like that. I think it's probably fair to say if there was a bigger puncher in there who caught Wardley with the shots like Huni did, that Wardley may have gone down, or maybe there'd have been more noticeable damage. So if you're Huni, it's clear you've got the boxing skills. Um, it's clear you've got the. I mean, based on that performance, I don't think his chin is actually bad. I know he didn't get hit that much, but mate, I mean, do you think Huni actually needs to work on his punching power more than anything? Maybe like, do you reckon that could take him to the next level, maybe, and actually in a fight like that where he's dominating every single round could be the difference between maybe him, winning and losing.
Yeah, I think sort of yeah, I guess Fabio Wardley and Justice Huni in that sense, they almost represent polar opposites, don't
Yeah,
they? Because you've
yeah,
got
it's true.
you got Fabio who's got the power, just the natural sort of physical advantages, and then you got Huni who's a more technically guy, but is a bit more limited in the power and sort of physical you know, that kind of thing. So I think like with Fabio where he can't sort of add to like he can only add so much to his technical arsenal. I think similar case with Huni where he can maybe work on his power a little bit, but there's no way he's gonna get to the level of being an absolute knockout artist like Fabio Wardley. So I
Mm.
think with Huni, like given the fact that he was so close to coming away with that win, he's got to take a lot of confidence from that. And I'm sure he will. I think he's the type of fighter that likes to sort of overwhelm his opponents with volume. He's a little bit more dynamic. He's a bit more fluid with his movement than a lot of heavyweights, and he can cause them problems by doing that for sure. I think eventually get found out because, as you quite rightly say, there's he will get found out in that regard, but he can still compete at this level or here or thereabouts for as long as he's able to really like he's only 26 years old, so he's
Mm.
got a lot of developing and a lot of learning to do as well. I mean, I still think because I said on the last pod I thought Huni had a ceiling, and I still think that's the case. Like um I think that lack of power, especially, is going to let him down in terms of wanting to, get to that next level.
Mhm.
But obviously, like I said at the beginning, I think there's a lot of exciting fights that Huni could be in, and he'll definitely cause a lot of heavyweights problems just purely based on that technical prowess and his sort of natural speed.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely falls into that category of the more faster heavyweights, doesn't he? I mean, I mean, it's fair to say, obviously, you're never going to be as good as Usyk, but maybe he should go down that mold. Obviously, he's bigger than Usyk, but maybe he should be kind of going down that mold because, Usyk is not the biggest puncher, but, by he's currently the best heavyweight in the world. So maybe Huni should go down that route. I mean, he's already doing that already. He was very fluid, Huni, on Saturday as well, which I was really impressed with. I love his his fluidity. But it's true what you're saying. I mean, you can't always. I don't know. With punching power, it's an interesting one. I don't think I've ever really remembered where someone's gone from being, like a non-puncher to a puncher, even in heavyweight division. I mean, look, heavyweight division, they can all knock each other out, but there's still levels to punching power, even in the heavyweight division. You know, Obviously Wardley is probably up there now in terms of punching power. Obviously, you had Wilder before he was, the upper echelon, and Huni is probably, yeah, he's probably got like average power. So I guess there's only so much you can do. So yeah, I definitely get your point that maybe, maybe he should. It's like they both need to lean into what they're good at, I suppose. Wardley just needs to keep leaning into that kind of, looking for that, maybe just looking for that big shot as the level goes up. And yeah, Huni maybe just needs to keep leaning into that technical side where, he's gonna outbox and he's gonna out outthink you, so to speak. Let's talk about what's next for both guys. Let's start with the winner, Wardley. I remember you last week saying that it's possible that he could face the winner of Kubra Pulev and Michael Hunter. But I think in an interview he said he didn't he call out Caballero and Parker. I think if I'm not
Did
mistaken.
he?
I think I saw that in an interview. I believe I might be wrong. I'll have to double check that. But what would you like to see Wardley do next? If you were Frank Warren and stuff, who would you match him with next?
Well, that's the thing because I think in terms of matchmaking, um, put him in, putting him in there with either Parker or Caballero would just be too much of a risk, and I don't see Wardley beating either of those two. Even if he sort of develops his skill a little bit, I still don't think he could get to the level of a Parker or Caballero. He might prove me wrong. I mean, he's proven a lot of people wrong, but
Mm,
I think. Yeah, more than likely it will be the winner of Hunter and Pulev, just because it's a very straightforward matchup to make. I mean, he's clearly gone down the WBA route, so he's got that interim title, and then the winner of Pulev Hunter will have the regular title. So I guess the winner of that fight is almost like a kind of final eliminator in itself, where the winner would become the mandatory challenger for Usyk, or at least the winner of Usyk Dubois. So I think Wardley, he'll definitely get himself a world title shot. I can see that happening.
mm,
Whether he can win a world title or not, I'm not quite sure because once you're at that level, it's I see we'll use Parker as an example.
mm,
There's not really anything with Parker that you'd look at and be like, right, he's really limited in that department.
mm,
Whereas, Wardley, as we've mentioned there, has clearly got that vulnerability with his technical skill.
mm, mm,
Parker could quite easily outbox him. You
mm.
know,
Yeah.
Parker could do that. And let's not forget, Parker's got a ridiculously good chin as well. Like he's shown that in a lot of his previous fights.
Mhm, mhm,
So I think, you know, and you find that with a lot of these heavyweight, like, well, in any division where you get to that certain level and there's not a lot that these guys are giving away in terms of, vulnerabilities. It's true with Caballero as well. And obviously, you mentioned Dubois, Usyk. These
mhm,
guys aren't giving a lot away in terms of
mhm,
vulnerabilities, whereas they'll probably look at Wardley and think, oh, I'll just outbox him.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fair enough. And I don't see why they wouldn't think that on based on that fight. But again, we keep comparing to Wilder, but I don't know I think the Wilder comparison is actually more relevant than ever now. I do feel like he's the new. I don't know. The new Wilder's a bit maybe harsh. I don't know. End of the day, Wilder was a champion for 10 years, wasn't he? He held the DBBC for ages. So if he has a career like that, then I'm sure he'll be happy. Um, what about for Justice Huni then? He's coming off a loss, but as is often the case in boxing, sometimes it's almost like it's weird boxing because sometimes like the performance is sometimes more important than the actual win. Because if you like, I don't know, we're going a bit off topic here, but like Shakur Stevens is a good example. Like he's unbeaten, but you know, when you stink the place out, your stock kind of decreases, even if you win. Whereas in this case, Rooney, because he performed so well, even though he lost, his stock has gone up. So, I mean, what's next for Hooney now? I mean, I think if I was his manager, I don't know if I would throw him in straight away in a big fight. But then again, I guess because his stock has risen, maybe that might happen. I mean, I'm just trying to think who could Hooney really face next. I mean, he's not going to go in with one of the top guys, obviously coming off a loss. But is it possible that maybe he's going to be thrown in with another fringe guy, maybe, um, in another, I guess, high stakes matchup? What What do you think of that? Who should Huni face next, do you reckon?
Yeah, well, in terms of sort of like heavyweight gatekeepers, which I think would be a good option for him to go with, like you'd go back a few years and someone like a Carlos Takam would be a
Mm.
good one to chuck him in there with because you know what you're getting with someone like Takam. It's just high volume, but not a lot else really. I think yeah, in terms of the heavyweight division at the minute, it's difficult to, mention names like people like sort of Jermaine Franklin, Otto Wallin,
Yeah.
that sort of level. They're mentioning those two fighters as potential opponents for Moses Tauma, but equally they could be, suitable guys for Justice Huni. I think Justice Huni could definitely beat either of those two guys. Maybe someone like a Derek Chisora, who's
Mm.
I know Derek Chisora's, he's chasing that 50th fight, and I don't think he'd pick someone like Justice Huni for that. But that kind of sort of level, that gatekeeper
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of bracket, that's where Huni and his management team should probably be looking. Um, but yeah, a couple of those ones stay at that level for a little bit longer. Like he's only 26,
Mm.
so just stay at that level, see how far you can get, build up a bit more sort of professional experience, and then who knows, maybe he could be fighting for a world title one day. But I do feel like, as I said before, that he will eventually get found out purely based off that lack of one punch knockout power. Especially in the heavyweight division, you can't really get to that top level without it, unless you're an absolute
Mm.
technical genius like Alexander Usyk. But clearly, that's not Huni. Like Huni's a good technical fighter, but he's no Alexander Usyk. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, either way, it's exciting because we were saying in last week's pod as well how Eddie Hearn hasn't really got a heavyweight stable, and he's
Mm.
probably coming away from Ipswich quite happy. Like even though his man lost, he's probably thinking to himself, "Oh well, I've actually got an interesting contender here." He's probably thinking like I could build
Yeah.
this guy up in Australia, and we know that the boxing scene over there is buzzing at the minute. So maybe a few fights back home in Australia, uh, and then Justice Huni could be, involved in some really quite big matchups.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fair to say Eddie Hearn he was going back to the press conference now. I think he actually believed what he was saying for sure. I believe now, when he was saying that they made a mistake. I mean, they very well nearly made a mistake, in that fight. Yeah, 2.5 rounds, and Huni could have had, I guess one of the upsets of the year, really, if you think about it. But yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. It remains to be seen with Huni. Only 26 years old, which is very young for a heavyweight. That is like a baby for a heavyweight. Um, so yeah, I mean, Huni's stock has risen, and I think as long as he's not too damaged from that fight, because sometimes when fighters kind of get when they get knocked out, sometimes it kind of ruins is a bit of a long, harsh word, but we have seen it. When the fighters are knocked out, they're never really the same. But I guess I'll counter that by saying he wasn't beaten up in there. He just got caught with one very big shot. And I think long term, that's less damaging than than actually getting like beaten up for 12 rounds, uh, for example. But anyway, overall, I think it's fair to say that, Wardley and Huni, I think for myself, I'd say they're definitely going to be part of the next generation of heavyweights. When the likes of Usyk and Joshua, Fury, and they all eventually, retire. I think these guys are going to uh, be part of that crop. And yeah, credit to both men. Wardley, we got our predictions right, Oscar, so that's something. We didn't have egg on our face, even though it was close. So credit to Wardley, absolute dog in there, massive power, and also credit to Huni, who I think comes across as a really good guy, very humble in defeat. And yeah, I hope to see a lot more of these two guys, in the future. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode. And as always, if you enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.